welcome to the Inside Britball podcast. My name's Andy Taylor and I'm joined by Arran and Kiwi as usual to talk all things flag, and I think we've kind of recovered from the weekend up in Scotland, the trip there and back. Kiwi, Arran, is that fair to say? Because we were all there in Ravenscraig and it was a long day but an exciting day in the end, wasn't it?
I know, I feel like, I don't know about you, and we didn't play, right? I didn't play. But the exhaustion on Sunday on our drive back was terrible. I think it was in our car on the way home. It was probably the quietest journey we've had in a long time. A 5:30 start on the morning, and with that game, and what happened in the end. The very late evening. I don't think we got back to the hotel till sort of 10:30. So it was a long day, and I hate to think how the players felt, but for sure there was exhaustion in our car ride on the way home. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was good. It was a bit of an emotional roller coaster, wasn't it, to be fair? But I mean, we can get onto that later. But yeah, a couple of shocks, a couple of exciting games, and then the finale. So yeah,
it was definitely a marathon day, wasn't it? Like, say, probably some people would have come up either the night before or they would have been staying that night. Certainly we did, didn't we? And it was just, I remember waiting for the final to start thinking, if I'm this knackered, and I'm not the fittest person in the world, but if I'm this knackered, how do the players feel after playing 3 games, and some of them 2? So well done to them, and I hope everyone got home safely, and I know we did in the end, but it felt like it was one hell of a marathon weekend just to travel up to Motherwell and back. But no, it was a great week, but we're going to focus in on the WFFL a little bit later, but we've got a bit of recapping to do from game day 1 of NFFL, which seemed to come around really quickly. It didn't necessarily catch us by surprise because we knew it was coming, but it was almost like, whoa, it's mid-March, game day 1's here, and we were just there, waiting for it to happen. So plenty to get to there. And we'll start there for sure. We'll go through some of the results, have a little look at what that means, and if there was any surprises. Me and Arran managed to get a preview out for the year. We did the year in the end, didn't we?
We did.
And we'll do game day 1s going forward, I'm sure. So we had a few predictions that we could, not predictions, but insights that we wonder whether they came true, because we all know how good Arran is at predicting results. But to be fair, if we have a look at the bracket a little bit later of the WFFL Finals, we'll all be wrong after the first round anyway. So without further delay, let's leave that pain till later. Let's have a little look at the at what happened in the NFFL. So it was only Division 1 in play this time around. We had Northern A and B, who are the cross-conference divisions in Division 1 North this year, and then we had the Midlands as well, which is the super division that we were trying to break down because there's like 50 new teams in that division, so it was easy enough to try and preview, wasn't it? But Arran, I'll give you first dibs just because you had a go at previewing this and quite a number of the teams quite well from last year. So suppose, what are your opening sort of thoughts to what happened in this division, considering you had a little time to think about what may have happened?
I think Border City Centurions played well and convincingly beat Lancashire Bombers, Wirral Vikings, but more notably, they beat West Lancashire Serpents by quite some score. Now, if you remember last year, obviously they were quite 2 teams that were very close to each other. So it surprised me a little bit because you'd see them being as main rivals based on last season. Obviously, we've got Warrington Revolution in the mix this time round. So I mean, a notable loss by the West Lancashire Serpents to Border City Centurions. They look like they've started how they mean to go on. Warrington Revolution came down, as we know, and have basically started again, with vigor, really. I don't know if that's the appropriate word, but they've hit the ground running with 3 wins from 3. With a big win, 41-0 win over Salford. So they were obviously I'm picking out the top of the table scores, or what you would expect to be top of the table. What I would say is I think Serpents, Manchester Ravens and Wirral Vikings look like they'll be battling against each other in this league, being honest, in this conference. And all look relatively well balanced on O&D, so it's going to take somebody's offense to really get kick-started to really start pushing them, I think, into the upper side of it. Obviously, Lancashire Bombers, they had a tough start, being honest, against the Revs and the Centurions, but were then also convincingly beaten by the Vikings, who are an experienced bunch. I obviously know them quite well, but I'm sure they'll see that as a missed opportunity, personally. And then Salford, equally tough start against West Lancashire Serpents and the Revs. So I don't think they can be quite disregarded yet. I know they didn't have a good weekend, but I wouldn't rule them out just yet. I'd say it's too early days on that front.
And Kiwis, did you share similar thoughts there? Because we wondered where Warrington would slot in. Now they've come down from the Prem and they've slotted right in where we kind of predicted. Me and Arran that they would probably be those division chasers, and they've kind of slotted in there with Border Centurions at the top. But is there anything else that stands out here to you from this game day one, which is I appreciate is really early on?
Well, what I found interesting looking at this is that Warrington Revolution score against Lancashire Bombers, where they kind of got that 1-point win. And then when you compare that to the score of Lancashire Bombers against Border City Centurions, which was a convincing win for the Centurions, it makes me question how close Revs are to chasing Border City Centurions, or are they kind of even there? There's a divide looking at those scores and the kind of opposition in common. So I think that's one to watch to see. Is that just a matter of, and I don't know what order the games were played in. Was it the last game versus the first game? Was it, were there other factors at play? But for me, that's the thing that I find quite interesting is that you look at that kind of neutral team and the score line between the two and the closeness of the game is completely opposite ends of the scale. So, yeah, maybe a question mark there for me on Revs being a close second. I think maybe they've still got some ground to pick up to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. As you know, I don't have personal insight into the flag league as yet. I'm getting there, picking stuff up as I go along. But certainly, what was notable for me when I take a lot of interest in West Lancs Serpents, being that they're just from down the road from me, and who knows, they might be someone I can suit up for one year. But I did notice that. Bobby Ludbrook was missing, who I know is a fantastic player. I knew him from the Nighthawks when I was there, but also last year he was the one who was intercepting everything on defense for them last year. Seemed to get defensive MVP left, right, and centre. So I don't know if it was just his game day or whether he's not there this year. I don't know, but you're shaking your head, Arran, is it because we don't know, or you're on?
No, my understanding is that he's not playing this year.
Oh, shame. Okay, that's going to be a big loss for them, because I know it's only one player, but it's a very good player that they're going to miss on defense for sure. So that's kind of what stood out to me. But going back to what we kind of understood may happen, and looking back at last year, where we obviously had no one from this division get promoted, did we? We had West Lancs champs, Border City were second, and Ravens were third. Well, we've kind of ended up the same, but Warrington have slotted in at the top there, haven't they? So maybe not so many surprises, albeit I definitely take your West Lancs take there, and we'll see how Lancashire can keep going, because as you say, they were really close against Warrington, and that would have given Warrington a bit of a scare, I'm sure. They certainly set the record straight in the next two games anyway, didn't they? Any other comments for this one before we move on to North B, who are going to be these cross-conference foes in game day 2?
No, I don't think so. Just the fact that it's early days, and you can say this against every conference really, but it's just early days. So watch this space. I suspect it'll change several times, that table, in terms of how it looks over the next few game days.
Yeah, absolutely. But it will be very nice to see some of these Northern B teams against North A, won't it? Because there'll be some cracking games coming up over the next couple of game days of cross conference, even though I'm noting that it's called interconference this year on the spreadsheet. But anyway, let's have a little look. I'm sure us and the HNC lads will still be calling it cross conference. Let's see. So over to North Bay. This was not so far away from Wirral in Manchester, but they have been aligned into the Northern B this year. So we've got both the Manchester Titan Bees and Tridents in that division now. Kiwi, obviously, we don't know, do we? We've lost a number of teams from this division at this point. So obviously, the Blackhawks have gone up, haven't they? Giants, which are now called, are they called Steel, the other ones? What were blue last year, weren't they? They went up. So we've had quite a big reshuffle of this division. So again, hard to read, especially with the Titans moving over and stuff like that as well. But Calderdale Locomotives are still waiting for that win. We still pray that they're able to get over. But is there anything for you in this line of results that stands out to you?
Well, just on the Calderdale point, maybe they're just waiting for Isaac to come and suit up for them.
For those of literally suit up and start handing people off.
Listen to some of our other podcasts. Isaac did have a foray or a trial of flag, but I don't think he went back. So maybe we need to convince him. Maybe he might be the difference maker. For me on this, I think it was a really mixed bag of results, and kind of I don't think there was a lot between a lot of the teams. The one team that kind of, I guess, had the biggest score lines and came away with 3 wins, you're looking at the Warthogs. Obviously had a relatively good day at the office and big score lines there. But again, and then apart from that, I think you look across the rest, and for me, there doesn't feel like there's much else standing out here. There's just a bit of a mixed bag of results across the show, I think. So I guess it's kind of maybe with the shuffling of the divisions and new opponents and people trying to get the feel of each other, it might take more time for this to shake out a little bit. Whereas when we talk about the A division, as we said, lots of familiar foes, people who have played each other before, all of those things come into play, right? And I think that's maybe something here with the reshake of the division is why we're seeing a little bit more give and take in the scores as they get used to the new teams and the different styles of play, because year to year teams change and personnel, but not a full turnover of team style doesn't change too much. So I think that's where you see the A kind of versus the B division that we're here.
Yeah, I mean, before I let Arran come in, I think what stood out to me most this game day is the Shadowhawks, a new team, B team to the Blackhawks, aren't they? And they finished 2-1, so that was probably, certainly from the outside looking in, a surprise that they were able to achieve such a thing. But obviously we know what the Blackhawks are doing up there in Newcastle. They're growing a program. They're obviously doing it right. They ended up facing up against the Manchester Titan Bees and beating them 34-31. Have a little look at some of their other games here, which are not they played Steel River in their first game, and they obviously went up against who are looking like early favourites, the West Yorkshire Warthogs. And to be fair, if you look at last year's table, if you remove those 2 promoted teams, and then obviously we know about the fall from grace of the Leeds Samurai, then you've got the West Yorkshire Warthogs left over from last year's division. It seems a bit right that they would slot in there with some of these new teams. But I think probably there might be some other surprises that Aaron's going to bring up that maybe from last year's foes you might be surprised of their results this time around. But I don't want to take words out of your mouth, Aaron.
Let's see. Very early days. What I will say about the Shadowhawks, fun fact for you, is they're currently sat in second in the table because of their scores. But strangely enough, they've conceded the most points than any other team in that conference apart from Calderdale. So for me, that's a sign that obviously the defense needs to improve. So I would argue, let's see how this goes and evolves a little bit to see whether they stay up there. So West Yorkshire Warthogs, my thoughts exactly in terms of your observations there, in that you take the promoted team out, you take out Leeds, you're left with West Yorkshire Warthogs as a strong team. Titans are strong teams. There's no two ways about it. Certainly the Bees are. So I suspect they will improve gradually as the season goes. I'm going to point out, though, that West Yorkshire Warthogs did beat 2 rookie teams this year. So in that game day. So we've got to be mindful of that. Titans Bees scored a lot, but conceded a lot. So they're going to need to tighten up their defense and probably just tweak their offense so they score a bit more. So that balance, so it isn't as evenly balanced. And then,
to be fair, Aaron, just to jump in there, it's actually only 1 rookie team because Tridents and Giants were there last year, weren't they?
It's true. It's a name change, isn't it? Yeah, it's a name change for Sheffield. So yeah, fair point.
Yeah.
Then you've got Steel River Stingrays and the Giants Iron. They both got wins against struggling locomotives who, unfortunately, as mentioned, they look like they're going to carry their 2024 form into 2025. So hope they don't. Hope they get a win. It was good in the. I'm not bouncing around a bit. It was good in the WFFL to see every team get a win, even the rookie ones and the new ones. So I hope this is going to be the same. So yeah, and I know a couple of them there as well. So hopefully they'll get that win eventually.
Yeah, and we all know.
Go on, Kiwi.
So I was going to say we all know how much kind of getting that first win can turn the tide a little bit, right? You then get a bit of momentum, you get a bit of that celebration, and I think it does kind of propel a team. I think the first one's always the hardest to get, especially when you've been struggling. So, I hope they do get there because I think you might see a bit of a switch in their form once you get that first win out of the way. It's almost like some cloud hanging over your head, right? But once you get it, then you can kind of focus on just playing, and I think you might see a bit of an improvement. Well, here's hoping anyway.
100%. Ravens, Serpents, and Stingrays for them next game day. So not anything against their opponents. We're just cheering for Caldale at this point to get that monkey off the back as we go along. But I'm sure we'll be picking up some teams along the way who we'll be cheering for as well. We always like an underdog on this podcast. But yeah, no, interesting day of murkiness for the Northern Bee, isn't it? So we'll see how that shapes out over the coming game days. And then let's flip over to the Super Division, the monster division, the division of what the hell's going on. We have a good old mix of new teams and old teams, and some of the new teams showed that they belonged, Aaron.
Yeah, definitely. Norwich Nomads. Who'd have thought that?
Welcome.
Eh? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although my understanding is the and I could be completely wrong on this, but so don't shoot the messenger here. But my understanding is that there may be a few of last year's Waveney Wolves embedded in that Norwich Nomads team. So I don't know for sure. I don't. Sadly, it's the furthest team away from me, unfortunately. So I haven't seen too much of them other than at finals last year. So in terms of Waveney, so I can't say that for sure, but that's what my sources tell me. Whether they're correct or not, I'm sure someone will correct me. But yeah, I think for me in this, each team could only play 2 games because it's that big conference. Yeah. But what I will say is on the face of it, for week 1 or game day 1, there's a clear winners and then losers, then a couple that are just 50-50 in terms of 50%, won 1, lost 1. So it's quite a straight divide if you actually look at the table on it. What I would say is the net points per game on some of these teams is just crazy. After just playing two games, Longhorns B is like plus 43 points, net points per game. So that obviously how many more points they scored than their opposition on average over them 2 games.
7 touchdowns win on average. Is that right? Is that my quick maths? That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. So it'll be good. It'll be a fun one to watch. This one, I think. For me, I think it can go anywhere. And again, when you've got game days where you can only squeeze 2 blooming games in, that table will change and yo-yo. So, like a broken record here, saying it's early days, but
of course,
clearly it is.
Yeah, and we must have got it wrong in our preview because I'm pretty sure that we assumed that Longhorns Orange was the B team, or the first team, and then the Longhorns Black was the A team from last year. Wrong, because Black handed it to Orange, didn't they? 54-0. So we now know which team is supposed to be the one chasing Premier action next year. So we certainly know that now. And for you, Kiwi, the people that we would probably put down as winning won, other than maybe Norwich. And so it's quite interesting to see how we've got these new teams. If we point it out to the listeners that we've got Huntsman B, we've got the Longhorns Orange, we've got a second team for the Titans, we've got Norwich Nomads. So it will be really hard to guess what's going on here until we've got a few more data points. But still, the new teams didn't let themselves down. Certainly Titans White.
Yeah, and I think this is where, as the season goes on, we'll start to see whether you do get that more kind of clearer divide between, because there's so many teams here that have like a first team and a second team, or do they have a balanced team? Like with Longhorns, we've clearly seen they've got a first team and a second team. Across the others, maybe we're not quite so clear yet. I think it'll be interesting to see. I suspect you may end up with a pack of the top teams in the bottom and the top, and then the second teams of that club in the bottom, and get that more clearer divide. So it'll be interesting. And then I think where you left in the middle will be maybe your teams who have kind of, like in this first game day, gone those 50-50 type, 1-1 lost one. There's kind of going to be the top and the bottom, and then the chasing pack in the middle. And I think that's clearly also going to be, because the division is so big, I think you are going to end up with those divides as the season goes on.
Yeah, and before the season, you probably predict that Honey Badgers and Huntsmen would be a difficult opposition, wouldn't you? For certainly the way Honey Badgers finished the season, if memory serves me correctly, they were on a storm at the end. And Northants Titans White came out and beat both of them. So certainly all eyes on you going forward. Titans White as this new team. Obviously Norwich, fantastic start for them, albeit they had the B team of Huntsmen, but. And then you've got the usual contenders in the Longhorns and Waveney, who were movers and shakers at the end of last year as well, weren't they? So interesting game day one. Arran, any more points from you before we move on to the weekend's action?
No, other than my favourite team name in the whole of Britball is definitely Nottingham Honey Badgers. Definitely. Yeah. Other than that.
Hey, now. I didn't mention it, but you stole that. We all know that was what I said going into finals last year.
Yeah,
for anybody who doesn't agree, you can go and have a listen. He's only saying that because I said it.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you.
They are my favourite, and I called it out as much last year. So not that I'm biased, but if we're just talking about names, then that's definitely the number one for me as well.
The things I've got to put up with when doing this podcast with you two. Hopefully the listeners and the watchers are feeling my pain. Right, brilliant. No, fantastic game day one. Looking forward to seeing what two brings, because we've got everybody for game day two. We've got Prem, cross conference. We've got normal conference. So yeah, lots to happen on game day two, which dates, I don't know what the date is today, let alone when the next game day is, but
12th and 13th of April, I think.
Okay, brilliant. So the week that's the week before Easter, isn't it? Yeah, brilliant, awesome. Okay, right, we want to get there, don't we? We're going to get there. What a day we had in Ravenscraig. Congratulations to HNC, who streamed those two games and did a fantastic job. Congratulations to all the different media outlets that were there, trying to share as much as possible, trying to get as many insights as possible, trying to drum up the intrigue on the day. It was great to see you all. It was great to talk, ball with everybody, and really enjoyed doing it. I especially enjoy being able to talk adult contact as well, trying to get some insight into previewing for the weekend. But it was my first finals, WFFL finals. It was my first WFFL game that I watched, which was the EKP Flame, which we'll get to, and really enjoyed the day. It was a marathon for us. God knows what it was like for players. There was a dip in the middle, which we all sort of recognised. It was almost like the preamble towards what was to come, the eye of the storm. But Kiwi, first dibs. We had 2 games on at the same time in the beginning, all day, didn't we? And we were treated to first up the EKP Flame, Panthers Giants on the second pitch, I think, if memory serves. And we got a shock on pitch 1, didn't we?
Wow. Yeah, and nothing that anyone, I think, saw coming. And it was interesting. I was on the sideline. I was on the EKP sideline for that game. For those of you who saw me, they know that I had our son James with me, so we were sitting in the stands chatting away. And it was funny, even some of the EKP people at the start of the game were like, oh, I'm a bit nervous, but I'm sure it'll be okay. Already almost thinking about the next game, right? Which was what we'd kind of assumed would happen. And then it just all went chaos. That's the only explanation I have. Things just didn't go to plan for EKP. I think they struggled with dropped catches. They definitely had opportunities to win the game, in my opinion. They were in good position a lot of the time. It was just mistakes that seemed to let them down. And what I find interesting, and I guess we'll come to this when we talk about what happened with the plate in the finals day, but we said going into this, right, EKP had completely dominated the North Division entirely, not challenged at all. But we didn't know how they would stack up against those kind of South teams. And the fact that we haven't had any cross-conference games to kind of benchmark yourself. And then I think, interestingly, with EKP, what we've seen throughout the season is there's been no pressure. Those catches have come easily. Things have gone to plan. Suddenly the pressure's on. A team's, doing well. I think they got the opening score, the Flame. And suddenly the pressure seemed to get to the EKP players, and then we just saw more mistakes happening, which is kind of uncharacteristic, but maybe just a symptom of the fact that they hadn't been pushed all season and hadn't been placed in those pressure situations where they had to perform. And unfortunately, as much as you try, you can't replicate that pressure or replicate that gameplay in practice, right? And if you're not getting the exposure to that in your division, unfortunately, it does put you at a disadvantage. And what we kind of assumed was, yes, they would be at a disadvantage, but they would overcome it, right? Because the Flame only qualified 4th, and coming from the South. So I think, and even like on the sideline, like I saw the H&C guys, I had a couple of chats with them. They walked past me as they were doing, checks up and down the sideline. And I think we were all just kind of like, what's going on? Like, none of us expected it, all this kind of shock in the room and all eyes on the game, just from the pure fact of it didn't go the way anyone thought it was going to go.
You know what was interesting for me in that game, and I tried to watch both games because I wanted to take in all of it as much as I could, which probably was the reason why I was exhausted by the end of it. But obviously the intrigue was happening on this pitch. It seemed like things were just happening really easily for Flame, and I mean that in the way that if a ball was thrown up in the air, it got caught. If it was tipped, it got caught. It almost like things were just magically happening for Flame, and I don't want to take away from them because they came away deserved. Jock there, number 88, was on fire that game. She caught everything, and obviously the QB's got to get it to her. So I said to them at the end of the game, said, do you two never drop a catch? Because they caught everything and they were amazing. Whereas for EKP, it almost like it was hard for them to execute. it was almost like they were forcing it, if that makes sense. And I don't mean that they didn't have the class or the skill, because we know they've got class. Their QB was brilliant. It was able to get the ball out quickly, was mobile. Obviously, we know the class of Abby Coleman as well, but I think they probably left about 21 points on the field anyway because of missed opportunities, of drop catches. And in the end, the Flame came out 26-14 winners. But that was my main observation there, was that it seemed like it was a bit more of a grind for EKP to get the ball moving than it was for Flame.
But I wonder if that, and I think for me, I agree, but I think that comes back to the point about the pressure and the tough games and the close games, and the fact that Flame really had to battle it out to even make the playoffs. They played a lot of games that were closer, a lot of better opposition. They kind of had, whereas it felt like EKP, it was a struggle because they weren't used to being under that kind of pressure. That's how it kind of felt from me. And then once one thing went wrong, it was almost like a domino effect of there's more pressure because we're losing by more. Oh, they've scored again. They try and force the ball. It was on, but there's mistakes and issues. I think that maybe is, for me, why it felt like that when we were watching it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
I think it was a classic case of not coming up against a challenge all season, and then when somebody actually, starts to mount a challenge against you, it's about keeping your head, it's about muscle memory, it's about, right, we know what to do, let's keep calm, we know how we do it, we know what, we're going through the motions. And I don't think they went through the motions. I don't think they handled it very well. I think they started to get in their own heads, because as you say, Andy, you're right. I think at least, there was at least 3 missed catches that would have been touchdowns in any normal circumstances for EKP this year, and they weren't. I've got at least 6 in my head, at least 6 catches that I saw that are big catches. So not necessarily touchdown catches, but big yard.
I couldn't do it. So, disclaimer, I'm not, no judgment on my behalf.
No, absolutely. At the end of the day, they've had an absolute belting season. I just think that, I just don't think they were prepared for that game in particular. I think they may have been prepared, and it may have been a different story if they'd have got through. And I do feel like we were robbed of a cracking semi-final, being honest. I think they'd have been prepared for that, and I think they'd have been prepared for the final. I just think maybe they wasn't quite mentally there and ready for the challenge that in fairness to London Flame, brought. And you're right, London Flame did look like they had the rub of the green. Everything that they did seemed to work and seemed to look right. So, and I just think EKP just let that creep in the heads, that doubt creep in the heads, and I think it just snowballed from there personally.
But they did do a great job of obviously bouncing back, and what that meant, unfortunately, meant that we had a southern championship bracket and a northern plate bracket, which was suppose without EKP was always going to happen, wasn't it? Because we didn't really see past Coventry, and Coventry getting into the semis. That would have probably been the biggest shocks of the day, wasn't it? But kind of want to, before we move on to the later rounds, kind of talk about the Leicester Huntsman Titans as well, because there was a lot of frustration on that Titans sideline, wasn't there? That the whole day probably, and we had a couple of comments where they were concerned that just the offense didn't wake up for a number of halves. But one thing that stood out to me was that the Huntsmen didn't necessarily have explosiveness on offense, but they had what looked like a fantastic quarterback in I think her name was Jess Allen, who you almost expected a bang to go off when the ball left her hand. It moved that quickly out of her hand, didn't it? It was fantastic to see. Presumably for you guys, no shocks there with Huntsman quitting over the Titans, but it certainly was probably supposed to be the tightest of the 4 that when we were looking forward, right?
Yeah, I think I thought it was going to be tighter. Forgive the pun, Titans tighter. Dad joke there for you. You can keep that. But or maybe not if you don't want to. I can tell by the look on your face. But you're right. I think this. Don't get me wrong. The Manchester Titans have got a really good QB as well with a hell of an arm on them. But you're right to point out that the Huntsman's QB, I would give anything to have an arm like that. It just looked effortless, and it's throwing him on a dime. But yeah, I expected it closer. But being honest, as you're saying there, early in terms of the sideline and the frustration on the side, I just think the Huntsmen were focused on what they needed to do and executed it well.
Yeah, I think for me, sorry. I was just going to say, I think this was the one that we thought may go either way, right? We couldn't really call. And then I think once we saw the upset shock of the first round of games, we kind of went, oh, I think maybe the rest of these North teams are definitely in trouble. I think it was still close looking at the score, but like you say, I think if you were watching the game, it probably felt like the Huntsmen were in complete control. It was never in doubt. They just, and it was probably the score is closer than I think the game seemed when we were watching it. Because, like I say, Manchester had this frustration. They kind of struggled initially, and then it really, they only came away with the one touchdown, which for Manchester all season also isn't something that we've come to expect. So, I hate to go back to this, but I think it does say something about the North-South divide, maybe the cross-conference, maybe we do need to look at next year, bringing some of that back, at least for one game day, maybe, where, because it's really hard to benchmark yourself throughout the season, especially for someone like EKP who dominated so thoroughly, to see how you are against those other teams. So then it comes to finals and it's like totally unknown. And then, we get these kind of results where it's like, oh, but maybe if we'd seen something through the season and at least one of those cross conferences, it might not have come as such a big divide, maybe.
And I do. That is the elephant in the room. Let's be honest. If you look at all the results of that first round, basically all the South teams go through into like the championship bracket, and all the all the Northern teams go into the plate bracket. And it just becomes. No, it's almost like the Northern Conference, the HNC Conference versus, each other again, like it was in the regular season, in the finals. Now, I think, being honest, I think there's definitely a divide between North and South in terms of the quality of the teams. I don't think EKP are benefiting from having for me, there's three teams, and then there's almost like three tiers of teams in the WFFL at the minute. There's the teams that are clearly the best, and I would put EKP in that bracket. I would put Panthers and Cougars in that bracket. Then I'd say there's the middle teams, and then I'd say there's the rookie teams, or not necessarily the rookie, but the teams that are developing, shall we say, such as the Huskies that we're a part of. I put them in that bottom bracket. And I think if travel wasn't an issue, I do think we would see a two-tiered competition, and I think that would benefit both sides of that coin. And the teams that are on both ends of that better, being honest. But unfortunately, it's not an easy job for the competition committee, especially given the travel involved. So I understand why they haven't, and I understand why they can't. But I think if travel wasn't an issue, I think for the benefit of the game and the quality of it, I think a two-tiered competition would be better in my eyes.
I think, and also something that we kind of probably touched on, if I recall back to when we first previewed kind of the season, I think we talked a bit about FFL is going through these growing pains at the moment, right? We've suddenly got enough teams to have two divisions, but it means that we've got this big gaping, chasm between the top teams and the bottom teams. We probably maybe don't quite have enough teams for two divisions when you start factoring in travel, I think. But what you have to be really careful about is while you've got this chasm in teams, when you're putting these rookie teams and these new teams up against these top performing teams, I think you start risking losing them from the competition, right? Which then sets the whole thing back. So I appreciate for the competition committee, it's tough, but I do feel like there must be maybe a better way. And I understand that we're going through this growth phase. We've suddenly got so there was a lot of new teams coming into WFFL properly this year. But I think, we do need to maybe look at it and go, how can we make this better for everybody? So the top teams get the best competition and those bottom teams get a chance to play and actually play meaningful games. And then when, because otherwise you just come away with a bunch of heavy losses, you start to struggle to bring people back, and then we start losing these teams. Mm-hmm. So, it's a hard balance, I think.
Yeah, but do you want to be the one that tells Aberdeen they have to travel to Iceni? It's one of them,
and that's where maybe we need to revert a little bit back to how things used to be with the central game days, and maybe teams share the cost of those central game days just to get a better quality of competition. And again, it's all these things that you have to balance when the league is going through this kind of growth phase. And I would like to say that, let's put everything back on the table, because I'm sure I'm not the only person as a player or as a spectator, or, in our capacity here at Inside Britball thinking these things. So maybe, there is another opportunity to look at how we do this next year and if there's a better way.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it develops. We look forward to seeing how it grows. But let's move on to the semi-finals, because we had some cracking games in the semi-finals that were just teeing up some glorious plate and WFFL finals. So we had at this point we wondered what Flame were going to do in this day. Just to set the scene, Flame had just caused the biggest upset on the day. At that point, they'd knocked out EKP. Oh my gosh, what are they going to do? They've got the Panthers next. That's where we were at the beginning of this round. And so they had the Panthers coming up, and they ended up Panthers ended up beating the Flame 27-12. But at this point, the jeopardy was there. We kind of still expected the Cougars to do what they'd done to the Huntsmen all year round. But then we had the Cougars versus the Huntsmen and the Panthers versus the Flame. Kiwi, I can't remember whether you were here at this point, because I know you had to disappear for a little while, but did you get to see the semi-finals, and were you able to have a little look at this, this treacherous game for the Panthers?
I think I caught the first half of the game, and then I went off to check us into our hotel for the evening, which in hindsight was a great shout because it ended up being a very late night. But I agree. I think what it did was that upset in the first round suddenly made us go, well, maybe this isn't going to be as straightforward as we thought it was. Maybe the Flame have gone away and done something dramatic with their plays in there. The jeopardy was there. I think most people still sort of felt like it would be business as usual, but suddenly there was this underlining kind of current of, but look what happened in the first round. We just don't know. The upset came that none of us expected. So, and credit to the Panthers, they kind of just went out there and did their thing and played their game and didn't let any of it kind of come back to them to say, because easily they could have got in their own heads, right? Look at how well Flame did against the EKP. Oh my God, we're going to have to put a pressure on ourselves to perform. But they actually just kind of went out, played their game, did their thing, and came away with the win.
I thought the Panthers' defense was just incredible. I know they obviously had to score. You have to score in flag to be able to pull away from things. I appreciate that, but I just felt that their defense was flying everywhere. There was I don't know the names. I'm sorry, I'm not going to try and guess, but there was two very tall ladies at the back in almost like safety positions, and I think one of them ended up being the MVP of the final. I think it was Emma Dedicoat, who was in the backfield there, and they would. I wondered at one point. I think one of the girls had blue and pink paint on her knee, and I thought it was that she'd lost the skin of her knee. because she was the one that was just jumping around everywhere. She was flying. She was on the floor more than she was off the floor, and that wasn't because she fell over. It was because she was flying in front of passes. And I just thought that they were just incredible. And to be fair, they've come away all day only conceding what's that 32 points whilst facing the London Flame and the Coventry Cougars in double overtime. And so I thought they were just, that defense was just a class above what the Flame could get through, regardless of the class that they had. But yeah, no, it was a really tight game. I think if I remember correctly, the first half was very, very tight, and slowly the Panthers pulled away and managed to stifle the Flame. But Aaron, we weren't surprised in the end with the results that we got, where we kind of got what we were probably expecting in the end.
Yeah, I think obviously once the first round was settled, I think we had an inkling on how this was going to go. I think we all knew that it was going to be Coventry ball in the final. It was just, how did they get there in terms of how did they perform, etc. And you're right, defense on the Panthers, amazing. I mean, kudos to the Flame as well. I mean, they didn't come up and make up the numbers. It's one of them. I felt a bit sorry for Leeds, because we know they had personnel challenges in terms of Leeds. So we knew that, their first game against Coventry was going to be, a real tough one. And then obviously they struggled a little bit against the Titans in the semi-final round of the plate. So, but equally, we knew it was going to go that way when really after the first round. So, yeah, I mean, Cougars were still at this stage firing on all cylinders on offense. I think if you look at that, they were 85 points in 2 games versus the Panthers, 50 something, 59 would it be?
They beat the Leeds Samurai 44-0, and then they beat the Huntsmen in the semi-finals 41-6. And I think I remember saying to you, Aaron, on the sideline, they're almost felt like that they were not even at a second gear across those 2 rounds. And I hope that's not a slight on the teams that they were playing. It was more the quality that they have. It was a GB defense at the end of the day that they had, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So, the semi-finals did go the way we thought they would do. A strong Panthers side, a strong Cougars side. Even if you look at the play, a strong EKP. And for me, and I know I said it, I think I said it previously, whether it's in conversation or not, but that final game day for us as the Huskies was the first time that we actually played Manchester Titans A and B, to be fair, but Manchester Titans A for the purpose of this conversation, and they looked really sharp. So I can understand the frustration on the sideline from Titans, but again, when you're looking at Manchester Titans versus Leeds in that plate semi-final, then that result for me was always going that way. So no surprises. Strong teams were strong, and they kind of dominated them games ultimately.
Yeah, the EKP ended up taking it out on the rest of the competition for the rest of the up into the plate final, which they ended up winning. They beat the Sheffield Giants 40-13, and then met the Titans in the final. And maybe you want to touch upon that final if you like, guys. But just a quick word on the Coventry Cougars that we had. It was a pleasure to watch them, and certainly in the earlier rounds to see them firing all cylinders in offense, and good luck passing the ball on them, because they had DBs everywhere, and having the likes of Laidler and Barrett and Thorpe, in that backfield, and and at some point I saw Grace Conway in the backfield as well, and you're just like, oh God, how are you going to pass on these guys? And that's only mentioning a few, obviously, as well. But before we get onto that final, which I appreciate we're running a little bit long now, but before we get to that final, do you want to mention anything about the plate and how that went? Because there was a lot of frustration in the final, but it ended up being quite a convincing win for EKP to come away with that plate.
I think for me, once EKP ended up in that plate, and once we ended up with all those northern teams in that plate, I think it was business as usual. I don't think we, expected anything different. They've dominated all of these teams all of this season. The one thing is they obviously managed to regroup, come back, and dominate the way we know they can, which shows that, they have that ability, which is, kudos to them. It would have been very easy to come away from what was considered a shock defeat in the first round, to pull it together and come back and then just dominate like you have done all season. Kudos to them for doing that. But I don't think there was any surprise in the fact that they came out and dominated those teams that they've dominated all season.
No, and you got to bear in mind as well is that the coaching team at EKP is pretty much the national champions in terms of their Glasgow Hornets in the NFFL. So, again, while handing out kudos, I'd certainly give the coaching team kudos for calming them down, getting them back on track, getting them refocused, and then, as you say, it was business as usual for EKP after that. So yeah, I think Manchester will be. I don't think they'll be pleased with that result. I think they'll have come away from that thinking we can do better than that. I know that the last time they played each other was in Stone Bowl that eventually got abandoned. But ultimately, they did a good showing against EKP, albeit I'd say the weather's a great leveler, isn't it, on that day? So you never do know. But they certainly was coming into that game and confident that they can do something against EKP, but unfortunately that didn't materialise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're going through a competition like this, and it's in the second half of the second game that your offense turns up, it's difficult to get that revved up, ready for a final against EKP, isn't it? So yeah. I take your point there, but I'm desperate to talk about this final. So let's get on to this WFFL final. If you are listening to this, if you haven't seen it, go and enjoy the final that is available on the way we HNC it on BAFA Flag. It's there on Facebook at the very least. I think it's on YouTube as well now. I saw that they've posted on there. Go and watch it. It's one of the best games you will ever watch. Fact. I think it was just unreal, and everybody's heart rate was high towards the end of that game. Kiwi, I'll give you first dibs at this because I know you've been bleating on about Coventry Bowl all year round, and but at the same time, it was just a joy. It was a gift that kept on giving, and just to let everybody know before I do unleash you on this game, we ended up being 20-20, didn't we, at full time, and then everybody went, well, what are overtime rules? What are the overtime rules?
I know, and running around going, what's happening? Is it extra time? Is it? We know none of us knew.
Alan Young going, do you know what the overtime rules are to the HNC guys? So obviously in the end you get first dibs. Yeah, you get a go each, don't you, from the half to score. In this situation, neither scored, and then it's a 1-point shootout. So a bit like NCAA rules in college, but adjusted for flag, I suppose, and we ended up with what we got. But a lot more happened before we got to overtime, didn't it?
So let's talk. The excitement is just, I couldn't even explain how it was on the sideline. It was like electric, right? Like I wasn't playing, but I'm pacing up and down the end zone like I'm playing, like I've got some kind of ultimate vested interest in this game. The tension, the excitement, the thrill. The only other game that I can compare this to that I've seen, and Arran was there for this as well.
Don't say it because you're going to ruin it for me.
The European Championship final between GB and Spain that went down to the final play of the game for GB to win that Women's European Championship is the only other game of flag that I think I've ever seen that even comes close to this game, right? Like the whole game was just tit for tat. It was one team gets ahead, the other team catches up, and then there was switching leads around. The whole thing was like just pure excitement. And you won't see me on the stream because you might hear my children if you're watching, actually, if I'm honest. But I was sat under the cameras in the back of the end zone, babysitting children with your wife, Andy, trying to explain to her at the same time what was happening, why it was so exciting. And even, you know, Sarah, Andy's wife, isn't you know, a follower of the game, didn't really understand the rules, but even she was like, you know, I don't know if it was my tension or my excitement, but she was right there with me, like, can't believe this is happening. And in the end, you know, we've got the children just while we watch, because, you know, it was just the excitement of it. But, and what a way to end it, right? Like, I've been trying to explain it, you know, I've been in work this week and I've been really tired because, you know, recovering from this long day. I think I've been tired all week, if I'm honest. And people go, "Oh, did you have a good weekend?" And I was like, "Yeah, I went and watched, you know, flag finals." How was it? Oh, it was amazing. It was the best thing. And the way I've been explaining it to people is like, it went to the point where it was like sudden death penalty shootout, right? That's where we got to. And you know, full credit to the Panthers, because to me, they were still the underdogs, I think, going into this. I know they had that really dominant win over the Cougars when we first had Coventry Bowl, when we talked about it. But then in the second Coventry Bowl, Cougars came back and dominated. And we know that what Cougars do is they hit their groove right at the right time of the season. They play really well on finals day. They save it all and they put it all out there on the field. Now, I had heard some rumours going into this game that Coventry had Panthers. Sorry, I should be clearer. Coventry Panthers and Coventry Cougars had kind of been preparing for each other all season, right? Because, you know, there was always an element that this was going to happen. But what Cougars had done, I believe, is kept back a playbook specifically for finals that wasn't on film, that hadn't been seen before, you know, because they knew that there was a good chance that either they were going to come up against Panthers, who they know inside out, or they were going to come up against probably an EKP team who will have done their research with those, you know, coaches and staff that we know will have been looking at film and trading film with teams. So I think all the hallmarks were there that it was going to be good, but I think it was better than what any of us expected it would be. And again, I'm just going to say it, but credit to the Panthers, because we thought Coventry would do it. They had the experience. They've got the finals experience. They've got the GB caliber players. They've always, up until now, kind of, in those tough moments and in those crunch times, come out on top, right? And for Panthers to hold their nerve in what was that really, really tense final. So what happened? And I'm loath to kind of give too much detail because I want people to go and watch it. But in those final shootout moment where, you know, there was a miss and then a score, and to hold it together to come back out and score that point to win the game, you know, it's no small feat, in my opinion. I'll stop there. I'll let someone else have a word.
Yeah, go ahead. No, honestly, the excitement's real because it was such an amazing final, and I think, you know, winners win, don't they? And I think there was almost a feeling of inevitability once Cougars got that win over the Panthers on the final game day. You wondered, was this just going to be another day for the Cougars to take on the Samurai, who were going to struggle against them no matter what anyway? Who were they going to face in the semi-final? Unlucky to them. And then who was it they were going to face in the final? Was it going to be Panthers or EKP? That was almost a foregone conclusion. And once that victory happened later on in the season, we were like, well, is that it? Is that it? Are they the team to beat? But the Panthers came in, and I think what you will pick up if you watch this game is how actually the Panthers had to claw back at some point in this game, because the Cougars were on fire towards the end of the first half and at the beginning of the second half. That you could not stop Grace Conway. That she was everywhere. And so she was catching everything. She was on crossing routes everywhere, and she was unstoppable. And rightly so. She's one of the best in the country. And then there was a pick, wasn't there, from the Panthers, and they scored off that, and that ended up taking a bit of the momentum away. And I think it's not just a case of a team that couldn't move the ball or anything like that. The 21-20, it was actually that we had ups and downs. We had a roller coaster ride throughout the game, and it all culminated in this overtime as well. And Arran, I think we're trying to do it justice as much as possible. But is there anything else that you can add that we haven't touched upon that just describes how amazing this final was?
No, I think other than highlighting the obvious jeopardy in this game, which was Cougars are going for a 10th title, local rivals, regular season games where it was split between each side. So the jeopardy in this game was just immense. The pressure on both teams is immense. And going back to what Kiwi was saying about the only other game, I've got it in my notes here, which is why I said don't say it, is it was one of the best games that I've watched in person for a long time, and that includes the GB gold medal winning game. So that just shows you how good this game was. So as you rightly said, Andy, if you haven't watched it, because for me it's not just women's flag football at its finest, it's flag football at its finest.
No, American football at its finest.
Yeah,
I think it's the best showing that Britball has to offer is that game, including contact finals, which maybe it's just because it's my first one. I think it's one of the best games that you get to see in domestic British American football. Honestly, it was incredible.
Yeah, I agree. So, fair play to the Panthers. Congratulations to them. That's their first title. They thoroughly deserve it after that showing and after the season that they've had. For me, commiserations to the Cougars. Don't you just know they're going to come back and absolutely they're going to have a big axe to grind now, because that number 10 keeps, it's eluded them this year, and I don't think they will allow that to happen again. So I can't wait for next season already. but yeah, and again, in all seriousness, you mentioned it at the beginning, but going back to the point of if you haven't watched it, watch it. The way we HNC it really upped the game in terms of streaming this year. So it is really good quality streaming. So, look it up on YouTube. It is also on Facebook, but I think it's just been added to YouTube. If you said, watch it. I cannot praise this game enough.
Yeah. And it was just the quality of players as well. Like, there was 10 people on the field at any one time, and you could put all of them in international teams. And I thought the dedication, I was thoroughly impressed with the defense. They made it really hard for offenses, whether it was going short, whether it was going over the top. As I say, it was those medium routes that Coventry Cougars did really, really well. And it felt like that the Panthers had just... yes, the Panthers. I'm so scared of getting them the wrong way around. But the Panthers had a lovely little speed option that kept the Cougars defense, honest the whole time. It was almost like you could almost see their DBs, their cornerbacks were they're unsure whether to keep dropping back or give up that space for that speed. It was almost like a jet that they ran. I don't know if it's called that in flag. Sorry if I've completely botched that, but is it a jet? And that was really effective in that game. And maybe that was one of those things that the Panthers were going to bring to the Cougars this time. But I didn't have the luxury of seeing the regular season game. But I'm sold. I'll be there again for sure, because that was a fantastic game to round off what was a very long day. But no, that it certainly brought some energy back to the room, didn't it? But overall,
I was going to say,
any sort of other thoughts that you've got?
No, I just think, look, it was an amazing day of a showcase for flag football. I think the atmosphere was great. I think we had the highs and the lows that you expect, the shocks, the upsets, and I think we almost sort of thought this year that it was going to be almost scripted, right? We knew what was going to happen, but all it shows is we go into these finals, right, and you literally just can't call it. And, you know, to all of the predictions and things that we said, you know, the other week, I think it just shows that, you know, every team that gets to the finals has a chance and anything can happen, right? I would love to know, Andy, how did your wife find it on her first foray into flag football?
I think she doesn't quite get it, does she? But I think she was very impressed with the event that you know that we're able to put on. You know, considering it, you know, I think Alan and the team did a fantastic job at getting everybody in the room. I'm still sure that there would be more if it was further south, more in attendance if it was. But I honestly felt that there was the right amount of people. It wasn't as cold as you promised it was going to be, which was nice. I think there was, you know, the Panthers brought plenty of people that made it really rowdy. EKP did as well. That, you know, that there was enough people there to make it really enjoyable. I love the fact that I only had to have my eyes on 2 different pitches rather than at NFFL where there's about 50 of them, it feels like. But I think, you know, Sarah always loves getting out and going away from home and being away. And I think, you know, we had a really enjoyable weekend that was, I think she really enjoyed the final as well. So I'm sure I'll be able to drag them to other ones. But more importantly for me, James had a lot of interest in it as well. He was loving throwing the ball around and getting his flags on that he picked up in Manchester last year. So yeah, hopefully I've got a flag. If I can peel him away from soccer, living in Liverpool is easier said than done. If I could do that, then maybe I'll take to a flag football sooner rather than later.
But I think, you know, that was something that I've always found with flag and flag tournaments and these finals in particular is there is always this kind of family friendly vibe. You know, we all had our kids there at the weekend. The kids had an absolute ball. There was loads of other kids there, people playing and spending time with them. And I always feel like I love contact. I grew up, you know, contact's where I've played for years, but I just think the vibe around flag is completely different. And I think I said this about the NFFL finals. It's a bit more festival friendly, fun. And I think, you know, that's what I love is I don't feel out of place bringing James to an event like that. My James, for those who don't know, we love the same James and inside Britball. 2 James, yes, as Andy was referring to them at the weekend. 2 James. You know, I don't feel out of place with that. Flaggy's always welcome. Everybody's chatty. Everyone, you know, it just is just a different vibe, and I do love it.
It is, yeah. It definitely is a community, isn't it? And it's a relatively small one that's growing. You know, I think I said that to a couple of people over the weekend that, you know, it's almost like a community that's welcomed, you know, an outsider like me who hasn't played, who hasn't commentated on it before. You know, they've almost welcomed us in, which has been lovely. And I personally, I just wanted to say thank you to all the teams and the managers and the coaches and the players who were more than welcome to talk to us as well. They were very engaging. They were happy to give us insight. They were happy to kind of give us their thoughts on what may or may not happen and what you know what the differences are and all that. So I really enjoyed it, and I thoroughly encourage anybody listening or considering attending a finals, a domestic flag finals again, to make sure that they do that, because it's such an event. You know, it's such a great event, and I think Bafford and Alan did a really good job on this one. And it wasn't Baltic as you promised, so I came completely overdressed.
No, I did. I had a boot full of layers that I didn't need in the end. But yeah, that's because they fixed the roof, which is good.
Yeah. So I had a bag full of layers that I left in my hall. Brilliant. Well, that's it for WFFL, isn't it? So that's it for another season, and what a season it was. It was very enjoyable to cover it, and it culminated in a fantastic finals day, which was really fun. And like I say, go and watch that final if you haven't already seen it. You will enjoy it, I promise. We've got NFFL now, haven't we? We obviously turn our eyes towards NWFL and adult contact and youth contact as well for the summer season. Maybe we'll have a WFFL in the summer one time that we don't have to worry about rain and storms as much as we do in the summer, but we'll see. But nonetheless, as we said on the Bucks podcast earlier on this week, it's been a pleasure covering the WFFL with you guys. Thank you very much for covering it and providing your insight and introducing me to it for sure. And we'll be back sometime soon. Won't say when because we've got Easter coming up. We've got Game Day 2 coming up, but it'll be sometime around Game Day 2 of the NFFL. We'll be back to give you our thoughts on that, and keep an eye on our website for our preview because we'll give you a preview article for Game Day 2 as well, which will basically be another year preview because it's everybody playing, isn't it? So awesome. Thank you guys. Hope you recover well from last weekend. It was busy enough. Thank you for the listeners and watchers. We'll catch you again very, very soon. Thank you. Bye.